From the most heated radio rants
this would have been the lap.
to crazy frustrating moments like this,
Yeah, moved under braking.
and even full-on post-race fights, Max Verstappen has delivered some of the wildest head loss moments in F1 history. But just how much of these chaotic moments have you seen? Don't worry, we've got you covered. If there's one thing Max Verstappen's 2023 season shown us, it's that even in a year of absolute Red Bull dominance, he is still very much susceptible to pressure. One of the standout moments came during qualifying at Spa-Francorchamps. It might have looked smooth from the outside, but behind the scenes, things were far from calm. During Q2, Verstappen just barely scraped through, finishing in 10th place. For a driver of his caliber, in a car as dominant as the RB19, this was frustrating enough. But what really set him off was how the team managed this session. Max wasn't shy about showing his unhappiness, and his sharp exchanges over the radio made it clear he wasn't impressed. It's moments like these where Verstappen's race engineer Gianpiero Lambiase really earns his stripes.
I should have just pushed 2 laps in a row, like I said.
You are through, Max.
Yeah, I don't give a
Somehow, GP managed to calm Max down, steering him away from frustration and back into focus. And in Q3, it was clear that Red Bull had learned their lesson, or at least decided to meet Max on his terms. Verstappen unleashed everything he had on the iconic Spa circuit, obliterating the competition and claiming pole position with authority. After securing the top spot, the tension he had earlier finally melted away. Verstappen, still riding the high of his stunning lap, even offered his version of apology, which, well, sounds more like the typical Max. However, this moment is just as tense as the next moment, although this time, Max doesn't get the opportunity to take the win. Now, I'm pretty sure many Verstappen fans will remember this moment back in 2021 at the Bahrain Grand Prix. It all began like a normal F1 event until it turned into the intense showdown F1 fans had been eagerly waiting for. A straight fight between Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes and Max Verstappen's Red Bull. It was a race full of drama, with both drivers pushing their limits to outmaneuver each other. For Hamilton, securing victory meant tapping into every ounce of his skill and experience. But the outcome wasn't just about wheel-to-wheel racing. It came down to a moment of controversy in the final laps. Verstappen had chased down Hamilton after his final pit stop, making a daring pass around the outside of turn 4 with just 4 laps to go. However, in making the move, he ran off the track, and race director Michael Massey quickly instructed Red Bull to hand the position back to Hamilton. Max followed the order, but the frustration was clear over the radio. It looked like he might be able to make another move, but despite his relentless efforts, he couldn't close the gap again.
So we're taking the outside, the track.
Okay, for the moment, let Lewis through. Let Lewis through.
And even though he was fuming, he just had to take the result considering it was his fault technically.
Why didn't you just let me go, man? I could have easily pulled this 5 seconds. I prefer to lose a win like that than be second like this.
Yeah, we had the instruction from race control, unfortunately, Max, but that was a hell of a drive you put there.
But what about this next moment when he had lashed out all the blame on his engineer? Nothing could have prepared us for what went down at the 2024 Hungarian Grand Prix. It was a race that revealed a side of Max Verstappen we hadn't seen in years. This time, he came with a storm of frustration boiling over spectacularly. After dominating the early races of the season, it looked like Verstappen and Red Bull were set for another walk in the park, a continuation of their 2023 dominance. But things started to change. McLaren, Ferrari, and even Mercedes began closing the gap, sometimes even beating Red Bull outright. Meanwhile, fans were thrilled to finally see real competition again as the cracks in Red Bull were starting to show. It was only a matter of time before it all went south. Qualifying was a disaster. Both McLarens locked out the front row, signaling a tough weekend ahead for Verstappen. Frustration came from him not just in the car but off track as well, where he made no effort to hide his disappointment. From the very first laps, Verstappen's anger was clear. A questionable move on the outside forced him to yield to Lando Norris or risk a penalty. And from that moment, everything unraveled. His mood went overboard, and his Red Bull struggled to keep up with the superior McLarens. With every lap, his frustration grew louder on the radio calls. Even his race engineer Gianpiero Lambiase was left speechless at times, unsure how to respond to Verstappen's increasing anger. The whole situation got out of control when he clashed with Lewis Hamilton in a fierce battle for the final podium spot.
This time he gets there, he locks up and he makes contact with his old rival. Verstappen and Hamilton come together again.
A third-place finish could have salvaged something from the race, but Verstappen's aggression and mistakes only pushed him further from contention. By the end, it felt like a throwback to Verstappen's rookie days in 2015, which is far from the composed champion we have come to know. But no one should really be surprised about his reaction because just 3 years back, he had a similar issue in the character department when racing against, you already know who, Lewis Hamilton. The 2021 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix was filled with drama, but the moment that really grabbed everyone's attention happened between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. On lap 30 37, everything got chaotic when Verstappen was told by his team to let Hamilton pass. Verstappen suddenly baked, causing Hamilton to collide with the back of his car as they approached turn 27. The situation was messy from the start. Verstappen had received the order to move over as they were approaching turn 22, and as he slowed down on the run to turn 27, Hamilton was closing in. But Verstappen decelerated even further, which caught Hamilton off guard. The Mercedes driver swerved to avoid the Red Bull, but the contact was unavoidable at this point. Hamilton's front wing clipped Verstappen's rear left tire, and the two were left in a heated conversation after the race. This brake test move sparked outrage from Hamilton and fueled an already heated rivalry between the two. Verstappen claimed the incident was a result of a miscommunication, while Hamilton explained he hesitated to pass because he didn't want to be the first to reach the DRS detection line. Doing so would give Verstappen an easy opportunity to repass him. The stewards reviewed the incident and concluded that Verstappen had tried to let Hamilton pass before the DRS line but went too far in his final attempt, essentially provoking Hamilton to make the move. It was yet another controversial chapter in the fierce battle for the title between the two drivers, but Hamilton isn't the only F1 racer to get involved in Max's anger issues. Back in 2023, the Dutch F1 driver and defending champion had a fiery reaction when Red Bull Racing asked him to abort his final qualifying lap at the 2023 Singapore Grand Prix. With the pole position within reach, Verstappen was leading Ferrari's Charles Leclerc, his teammate Sergio Perez, and Mercedes' Lewis Hamilton in a tense wet-dry qualifying session at the Marina Bay Street Circuit. As he pushed for a better time in the final moments, Verstappen was told by his team to pull into the pits. Once again, this triggered his frustration, and the F1 racer didn't hold back, expressing his anger with some cuss words over the team radio.
I'm sorry, but I cannot drive with these upshifts. What is this?
Understood. We were anticipating the comment. I'll have a look, see if I can give you a switch position.
Unacceptable.
After the session, Verstappen explained the reason behind the decision. His car was low on fuel, meaning it wouldn't meet the FIA's requirements for a post-qualifying fuel sample.
I think we were a bit unlucky with the safety cars 2 times. Otherwise, I think we could have done more. Yeah, 2 times the safety car this time didn't help us. Of course, we went on the alternate strategy, and then you need to hope that it all works in your favor, and today I think it didn't. But yeah, that happens sometimes. I think overall the car was a little bit better in the race again, which I guess is the most important.
Still, he was clearly upset, feeling that the team should have let him finish the lap. He was convinced he could have secured the pole position, which left him even more frustrated with the situation. And if you think that situation isn't chaotic enough, here is another Verstappen moment where he got out of control. During FP2 at the 2020 Portuguese Grand Prix, Max Verstappen was flying through a hot lap when he collided with Lance Stroll. And if you know anything about on-track clashes with Stroll, you already know it's not going to end smoothly. In the course of the event, Stroll had just completed a quick lap, so you would think he would let Max through, right? Well, not quite.
Man, is this guy blind? What the is wrong with him? What a...
This is Lance Stroll we're talking about, and things got messy. Naturally, Max was not having it, and his frustration was written all over his reaction. As for Stroll, his explanation didn't exactly help matters.
Well, I was coming up to it, so I don't know where I had to go. I was starting my lap, he just finished his lap, so I don't know, we'll see what happens. I mean, it's FP2, but it's just a shame that, we touched. It was just very unnecessary. It
just confirmed Max's suspicion, most ironically. Unsurprisingly, Max wasn't buying the excuse. And honestly, given some of Lance's past performances, you can almost see why. In the end, the FIA chalked it up to a misunderstanding, meaning no penalties were handed out. Technically, they weren't wrong, but by the time the session ended, it was clear Max was still absolutely angry. Meanwhile, Stroll was left doing his best to explain the whole ordeal. Safe to say, it wasn't one of their finest moments. But even though having a race ruined is every driver's nightmare, what happened at Interlagos in 2018 was one for the history books. Max Verstappen, starting 5th on the grid, delivered a phenomenal performance, clawing his way to the front of the pack with relentless precision. By lap 44, he was in the lead, and it looked like he was on his way to a flawless victory. But then, out of nowhere, Verstappen was hit and spun off track. This time, the culprit was Esteban Ocon, driving for Force India, who wasn't even in contention for the lead. Ocon, on fresh soft tires, was trying to unlap himself, a bold and unnecessary move against the race leader. It ended in catastrophe when the two cars collided. Verstappen's lead was gone and his race was irreparably damaged. Any driver would have been furious, but with Max, you knew the fireworks were coming. Ocon received a 10-point stop-and-go penalty and a 3-point penalty on his super license, but for Verstappen, it wasn't enough. The Red Bull driver made his feelings crystal clear after the race, confronting Ocon in the paddock. What followed followed was a heated exchange as Max shoved Ocon multiple times in full view of the cameras. The fallout was just as dramatic, and the post-race interview with Verstappen displayed it. After the match, Verstappen was handed a 2-day community service penalty by the FIA for his actions, and the hate between the two drivers increased after the race. Meanwhile, Ocon tried to explain himself, claiming no responsibility for the incident, which only added fuel to the fire. But for Verstappen's race engineer Jean-Pierre Lambiase, it was another exhausting day managing his driver's frustration. But let's talk about the 2020 Tucson Grand Prix, an intense race that highlighted just how untouchable Mercedes was that year. They weren't just dominant, they were in a league of their own, but there was one driver who could occasionally wedge himself between Hamilton and Bottas, Max Verstappen. In qualifying, as expected, the Mercedes duo locked out the front row, with Max securing third. To give you an idea of just how dominant Mercedes was, the time gap between Bottas and Verstappen was massive, and the gap between Max and his teammate Alex Albon was even bigger. On race day, Max wasn't just chasing a podium, he was gunning to beat Bottas and maybe even Lewis, and he got off to a stunning start. But just as quickly, things went south.
I'm stuck. This is what you get with this. Honestly.
His car lost power, dropping him all the way to P11. By the time the power returned, the damage was already done. A podium seemed almost impossible at that point. And then it got even worse. Max gave it everything. Full throttle, flawless gear shifts, but his car wouldn't cooperate. His race was over before it truly began. Honestly, you couldn't blame him. It was a case of terrible luck, and there was just nothing he could do to change it. But here's another moment where his anger is somewhat unjustifiable. Back in 2021 at the legendary Monaco Grand Prix, the spotlight was on Saturday qualifying. On this narrow street circuit, pole position is almost as good as a victory, given how notoriously difficult overtaking is. That year, the dominance of Red Bull was still a season away, making Max Verstappen's fight for pole even more thrilling to watch. The session was shaping up to be a nail-biter. Valtteri Bottas set the pace in Q1, while Charles Leclerc lit up Q2, putting Ferrari in the spotlight. Heading into Q3, it was Leclerc again with the fastest time, holding on to the provisional role. Verstappen, though close, was just over 0.2 of a second behind. It all came down to the final run. Max was pushing harder than ever. His first sector was a purple 18.4, suggesting he might snatch the pole right at the end. But just as everyone braced for a stunning lap, the unexpected happened. Leclerc, while on his final flying lap, clipped the barriers and crashed, bringing out the red flag and ending the session. The incident threw the paddock into confusion. Was it a mistake? Was it intentional? With Monaco's history of controversial qualifying crashes, there was no answer to these questions. Meanwhile, Verstappen, stuck in second, was fuming. His dream of a Monaco pole had been snatched away. As usual, his race engineer Jean-Pierre Lambiase was left handling a very unhappy driver. For Ferrari, they had pole, but Leclerc's damaged car left them scrambling. By Sunday, the drama turned to disaster. Leclerc's car failed to start due to issues from the crash. Meanwhile, Verstappen, who had been forced to start second, seized the opportunity with precision. He dominated the race, securing the first Monaco victory in his career. In which of these moments do you think Verstappen went a little too far with his reactions? Share your thoughts in the comments down below. We would love to hear what you think.